Excuse me, I won't be long.
No, eat away, Jen. So welcome everyone to the 5th session. We had to put it off for 2 weeks, but we're here tonight. We're going to be looking at sensing muscle dynamics. And we've had apologies from Roxy and Bianca and Sandra. So hopefully they're listening, and hi to all of you guys. We missed you. I thought what we do is obviously we'll do a quick check-in and see anything that's arisen from any of the stuff we've been discussing or things that might be happening in your class. Some of you might have moved back to face-to-face now with all the COVID stuff opening up a bit. And then we're going to move into the sensing muscle dynamics. And tonight's going to be very sort of experiential because the topic is sensing muscle dynamics through yoga. So rather than a PowerPoint tonight, we're going to be doing a bit of movement and experiential stuff. Okay. And I also want to introduce you to a technique called Hana. Some of you may or may not be aware of it, which fits really beautifully in this part of the work. I think it's really complementary to this concept of sensing muscle dynamics and is super simple to incorporate into yoga. So, but we'll talk more about that when we get there. So a little bit of a practical session tonight. And the article I sent you, I hope you realize there was only a couple of pages that I felt were really useful. And particularly the page with the table on, I thought was a really, on page 1560. You may or may not have that handy, but I thought it was a really lovely expansion of some of the stuff we've talked about in terms of window of tolerance, fight and flight, and what to see in the body. And speaks a little bit to this concept of muscle dynamics, because sometimes the dynamics are part of the freeze, fight, flight response, which we'll talk about. So there was that, and also Dave Emerson's little taking you through class. So any feedback you have on those in the check-in too, that would be really nice to hear as well. So I might kick off the check-in, so you can all relax, because normally it's one of you have to sit there and decide. So yeah, so I've been having fun in this Mercury retrograde with computers, and all sorts of things have been breaking and falling over, and clients have been ratty, and I just got a message from the agents today. They're putting my rent up and at the clinic, and I thought, oh yeah, just give me another load, that's okay. Got a bill from the tax office. It's like, yeah. But I have to say, I feel like I'm going okay, you know, like I've had a few little brain farts and a few little, but then it's like, okay, well, let's get on with it, because I lost everything on my other computer. So I thought I had stuff backed up.
Oh, no.
So I thought, okay, well, it's a new start. That's okay.
Wow, so that's a lot.
I could be just delirious with stress.
After the equinox, Shirley. That was a very powerful, was it solar, the solstice?
Yeah, the 21st. Actually,
yeah,
yes, there was a lot.
That was a very, very powerful time. New start, absolutely.
So that's what I think, new start. So that's okay. Work's been really busy, and I think I've mentioned to you that I'm also doing a Buddhist psychology course. It's a 2-year course with ABCAP, and we had last weekend just gone. We had a 2-day. It was online because people can't travel at the moment. With Venerable Tenzin Chodron, who's a Tibetan Buddhist nun, and she's worked in palliative care for like 40 years, and just this wealth of knowledge about death and dying, and sitting with people that are dying, and the very pragmatic view she has from the Buddhist perspective of karma and what the death process is and the different stages of death. And I just wanted to share one little thing that I felt really touched me. And I thought, as yoga teachers will most probably touch you as well. And you may not already know about it, but she talked about when a person passes, there's a medical death where the breathing stops. And the Buddhists then believe that the mind consciousness, which still has a number of stages to go through before it separates from the body, may take, in an advanced practitioner, it may take a couple of weeks. In someone like me, not terribly advanced, might be a day or two. But she said, what you can do is when someone's passed, if you place your hand, don't touch them, but place your hand over their heart, even a few hours after they've passed, you'll feel warmth. And that's the mind consciousness still sitting there.
Wow.
And she said, whilst that's there, the body decay process doesn't start. So once that area is cold, that's a sign that the mind consciousness has left the body. And then what happens is the putrefaction process happens, and that's when the body starts to smell. But up until then, so I just found that very fascinating. But this lovely sense of the warmth just radiating from the chest,
From the heart, yeah.
from the heart. It all concentrates into the heart.
So there are stories of monks and spiritual people who, having had taken that last breath, years later are still in their perfect human form.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Yes, they have this period where for very advanced practitioners, if I know we're off topic now, but if you're a very advanced practitioner, that period of time from medical death to separation of mind consciousness is a possibility of high spiritual evolution. Like you can really do some work. And so all the practices they've done in their lived experience then come into play. And so the longer they can stay, they can get closer to what they call Buddha nature, because there's less obscurations to deal with. And so their mission is to try and stay sitting, and this concept of last thought, first thought. So last thought before medical death may be first thought in next rebirth. They're always working towards positive, compassionate, equanimous sort of last thought before last breath. That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
It really is.
Charlie, what's her name again?
Tenzin, Tenzin, Chodron, Chodron. So she works at a palliative care hospital here in Brizzy called Karuna, Karuna. And she's worked there for years and years, and she's quite a beautiful soul. And she does run spiritual palliative care courses for the dying, if that's an area that you're interested in or working with. And really talks about, it's good to know this process. And she works a lot with families who may not have any Buddhist inclinations, but sort of discusses the understanding of what might happen. She said sometimes it gives a lot of comfort to families. So anyhow, sorry, but we've gone off on a tangent, but it was very interesting. And I thought I just want to share that because I think that's just such a sweet moment.
Can I add something to that, Shirley? Because
absolutely,
it's so relevant to what I've been through. Just after our last meeting, my girlfriend's husband died very suddenly. We had the meeting on the Monday and he passed on the Tuesday, and she tried to resuscitate him for half an hour and couldn't, obviously. And I got to my work, which is a medical receptionist part-time, and their doctor was one of our doctors. So I heard about it within an hour of him passing, and I left work to go to my friend. And this warmth that you were feeling about, he was, the paramedics hadn't been able to help, obviously, either. So he was lying on the lounge room floor with a sheet just placed over him. And I didn't realise he was there when I first arrived into the house. I went straight to her. So about half an hour later, I went to the kitchen to make tea for the few friends that had arrived. And I felt, as I walked past him on the floor, I seriously felt like a cushioning. And I didn't say it to anybody else because I thought it might have just been me in shock, because it was a big shock to all of us. But I definitely felt it again when I walked past a second time. So it was all around him, and I got this overwhelming feeling of love. It was really quite powerful. And he wasn't a practicing Buddhist. He wasn't a particularly spiritual man, but he had a lot of love for his family, his two daughters and his partner. So It's interesting because I have heard and I've read a bit of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and you know, I've met some of the monks over the years just briefly at different situations, and I can honestly say I've experienced it. It was this beautiful cushioning of energy. And, yeah, he'd been passed for about an hour and a half when I got
Fascinating,
there.
huh? Yeah.
Yes. So isn't it interesting you talking about it? And
yes,
you know,
and the invitation there is that when that happens, to not move or disturb the body, but keep it comfortable and minimize the noise, so that there can be a sense of, you know, moving through the different transitions into the different bardos. Whether you're a Buddhist or not, you know, people that have an open heart and are kind most probably, I have fantasized, most probably have a different death than people that are a little bit more tortured and stuff. But there was a lovely story, I'll just share this. She talked about one of the lamas at Chen Rezig, which is a Buddhist place up here on the Sunshine Coast. When 9/11 happened, some of the monks developed quite clairvoyant capacities. They just see it as a karmic ripening. And he said that the intermediary bardo, which is where people have died but they haven't quite yet transitioned, he said was full of people that were confused. Wow. Because when 9/11 happened, suddenly people just lost their lives, and people were sort of in the bardo sort of saying, what's happened, where are we, don't know where we are. And they did a whole range of different practices and stuff to try and help them understand what had happened stuff. Like, I find that all very fascinating. I have a very open mind to it, but yeah, so anyhow, there we go. So that's been my time since I saw you.
It's been big.
It's been rich and very full and very busy, but good.
Well done.
So thank you. Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Well, I've had a little blurb, so I feel like I should hand it over.
Anything more you wanted to share, Jen? Just generally about your yoga classes or anything around the work, or?
Yeah, well, I've got my yoga classes happening back in my yoga shed, but I'm finding probably 50% of the participants want to keep Zooming. So I'm Zooming while I'm teaching.
Oh, okay.
And recording, because then I've got a lady in Bangladesh that I was telling you about, and then since then another friend of the same Australian woman who's a retired yoga teacher in London in lockdown, she started doing my class, which really intimidated me at first. I thought, oh my goodness. But anyway, she's delightful. So I've got some people still Zooming. I'm just not sure whether to stop it completely. With all this happening, I feel like I want to keep doing it, as well as it's really nice having people back in the space, which I'm sure you'll all appreciate.
Yes. How do the people in the space respond to the fact that there are also people on a computer joining in? Have they said anything?
They jump up and they say, "Oh, hi!"
Oh, okay.
Because they mostly know each other.
Oh, nice. So it feels good.
I've tried so far to interact both the groups as one, but I don't know how effective it will be, because you know, you've got to have the computer set up obviously in a certain spot in the room. So for now it's a compromise. I don't know that I'll keep doing that.
Okay.
The people that are
would you ever consider, Jenny, would you ever consider running a face-to-face class, and for those who want a Zoom, separately doing a Zoom class? Do you have time?
Yeah, I'm doing that as well, Valerie. Thanks for that suggestion.
Oh, right.
That's reassuring. Yeah, I've got a Zoom only class on a Wednesday night, and then I do Monday, Thursday and Friday mornings, and I Zoom while I'm teaching Monday and Friday. But I don't Zoom while I'm teaching the men, which is Thursday night, because they prefer not.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'm waiting for someone to come out with Zoga, you know, a combination of Zoom and yoga, because so many people are Zooming their yoga classes now. It won't be long. I'm sure it's happened somewhere in the universe. But the other thing on that, Jen, is you might want to just do like a little informal questionnaire that you email to them, rather than asking them on the spot, because sometimes people don't always give an honest reflection on the spot. But if you send a little questionnaire saying, you know, we've had a few changes in the class and this is what I've been doing, how's that working for you? What would you, you know, and just get some feedback and see what people think.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been going through my mind because it might suit some and not others. Yeah, definitely give them the option.
Yes, but you run enough classes that I think people can find a class that suits them. It's not like you're only running one class a week. So I think you give options so people can also self-select and choose as well.
Thank you. Thanks for all that.
Beautiful.
There's just one thing, maybe it's an impromptu, it's an inappropriate time.
Go for it.
I just heard on our media recently, I'm not sure if Narelle, you're in New South Wales, you've heard, and Shirley, apparently there's a really large demand for PTSD therapists on the Sunshine Coast at the moment. And when I'm finished my training, that's something that's going through my mind as an option, because there's a need everywhere by the sound of things Australia-wide with COVID.
I'm glad you raised that, Jen, because I actually think there's a growing need for trauma-sensitive yoga teachers everywhere. On the Gold Coast, I most probably get a call every other day from an NDIS program manager looking for a trauma-sensitive yoga teacher. I point them back to our website. I'm sort of not interested in doing that work. But there's, and that's just happened, I'd say, in the last 10 months. There's something has shifted. Might be a little bit of COVID too, but I think the NDIS is becoming more aware of the trauma-sensitive yoga. So, that might be something for all of you if it's a thing that you're interested in. The challenge in the NDIS is you'd normally work through a service provider. So to be a provider yourself on NDIS is quite expensive. So the way things happen is someone goes to NDIS for a plan, okay? And as part of their plan, they're awarded a certain amount of money. So there's a whole lot of assessment that's done to decide the degree of disability. And disability can be both physical, intellectual, and on some levels mental, although mental is not seen as the primary criteria for selection on NDIS, which is a bit of a criticism of NDIS. So some people who may get a mental health plan on better access for trauma may not be seen as appropriate on NDIS. So having said that, then once that happens, sometimes then the program managers, the client may have decided, I'd like to do some trauma sensitive yoga as part of my plan. And so then the program manager has to go and find someone who can offer that service. And so you may not be an NDIS provider, but what happened is you'd invoice that organization and they would pay you out of the NDIS. So it can work that way. It's quite demanding sort of work, and it's one-on-one work. So I'm not sure if that's the sort of work you'd want to do. I'm not aware of group classes being offered under NDIS because it's normally individual plans. But yeah, it's definitely growing. Yeah.
Well, it's great to be able to help somehow, whether it's
absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
So how about we go to Narelle and then we'll go to Valerie.
Okay. I've stuck with my one class, one Zoom class, because the group really love teaching from home, and I'm really enjoying teaching from wherever I am. So whether I'm on the farm or Moss Vale, it works really well. And they're just a lovely group of women. We're all writing, and so we do yoga on a Tuesday, and then we meet and put our writer's hat on. And,
oh, nice.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and they're a really creative group, and we keep sort of finding other reasons. We go, well, let's do this on a Wednesday morning because, we can start doing other things. So I'm really just enjoying the connection. I feel like they're just a really beautiful group of friends. And so I've been writing. It's helped me really commit to the last 6 months. I don't know if I've mentioned, but I've been documenting my own trauma experience and my sort of way of coping and what I've tried and what doesn't work and why I think it doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. So it's become
beautiful.
It's become like actually a short story, and I think I'm nearly done. I think I'm nearly finished. So, and it's a free verse poetry style. So it's sort of the experience wrapped up in the present moment each day. So so I've really enjoyed that. Yeah, it's been very therapeutic, I think, for me.
Yeah.
It's starting to feel like something that will be worthy of sharing. That might help.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So so that's me. And as far as the video, the David Emerson's
Yes.
video, I really enjoyed practicing it and the core strength work he was doing. So leaning back and just in the core and lifting one leg. And, you know, once I was so into my body, I didn't like holding my leg for too long. I just wanted to sort of lean back and feel that core. And to me, that's just the essence of yoga. Aside from the trauma work, I think that this is really essential information for any yoga teacher to be able to teach, or for a student to experience the body to that degree.
Yes.
To me is really important to not miss that and be rushing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that little bit that you raised there, Narelle, is very much the sensing the muscle dynamics, sensing the intensity of muscles, and realizing that actually we have control over that. So we can, you know, we can sit back and feel them working, and then at what point does it become no longer sustainable? And then what do? Do we come forward and let it release, or do we stay there and go into some sort of freeze or muscle armoring to hold it? And that speaks so much to themes then around survival in the world for people who've had a lot of trauma in their life. So it's a beautiful transition from the mat to off the mat work.
Yeah.
In a very sort of visceral way, particularly the core, because it's so visceral. It's right where all the digestive activities going on, and assimilation and releasing and stuff. So it's quite potent.
It is, you know, and on those days where you don't feel like doing yoga, you know, to me, that's just such an effortless effort, you know, it's just, you know, you're just tuning in and learning so much about your body and your inner strength. There's such a lovely message there. So I really enjoyed that.
Oh, good. Fantastic. Thanks, Narelle.
Say, Shirley, thank you for continuing with this program, considering you've had so much going on. I really appreciate your commitment, and the information's been fantastic. It's been really lovely to speak with you regularly.
Oh, that's great. No, I love the sessions. It's really good. I'm thinking of changing the format moving forward, because I've been offering it this way now for about 5 or 6 years. And I'm playing around with a few different ideas. Nothing's really landed yet because I haven't really had any time to stop and think about it. But I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Beautiful Valerie there. How are you traveling?
I think I'm going to sneeze.
Oh, no.
Anyway, I shall try not to. I'm traveling really well because I've gone back to July is my month off. Winter, I can get up late, I can go to bed early. So it's that real, just living with the season. And the last few days have been wild and stormy, and I can't see the moon. I wouldn't know what's up there. It's just been cloudy. So it's been really wintry, and that I finished classes last Tuesday. I've been back since for 7 weeks.
Oh, brilliant.
Face to face. Yeah, so just because the venue is one that's managed, so the staff are there to prepare the room, clean up after.
Nice.
I just wasn't. I'm not going in there to go washing door handles.
Cleaning toilets and stuff like. I've heard so many yoga teachers say to me, I've had to clean toilets and wipe doorknobs and.
Oh, really?
No. So, and my mob were very grateful too. They came back with a vengeance, and the venue has been fantastic because things have been slightly different in WA from what you've been doing in other places. But the venue, the room I use is dividable by a folding door. So they just opened the whole place up and only charged us for the half space, the old space.
That's good.
And they've continued to do that to the end of the year.
Oh, wow,
So,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's needed, if it's needed. So they'll give us this year at that. Right, so everybody's very happy, and we've been warriors. We've been spiritual warriors and opening our hearts and being strong and getting out there in the world. So
Fantastic.
that's been really lovely, but I have to say I am really enjoying it. I haven't even had a week off yet, and I'm just loving it. So I feel as though I've been able to give in this past week more time to the preparation for tonight. And I don't know if it was intentional, Shirley, but there's the Bessel van der Kolk 1 hour and 30 minutes, 1 hour 40 presentation of his, which was some time ago, to a group of people. I just sat there. I couldn't move.
Oh, so would have followed the
For
Dave
1
Emerson one, did it?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
the next. It just turned up, and I went, oh, okay, I better look at this, because if I don't, I'll lose it. And I was mesmerised for an hour and 40 minutes. Couldn't remember anything.
Yes.
But he's extraordinary.
He's a lovely guy too. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, hugely compassionate and
very warm heart.
Yeah.
Very like, for a psychiatrist, I really admire the fact that he's willing to look at all the different treatments, and if the evidence shows that they don't work, he just says, well, let's not do that. He's not wedded to anything in particular, which is really, I think, fantastic.
Yes. So it's there. I'm going to take some time out to have another look at it. I was interested in my response to David, is his first name?
Dave Emerson.
Yeah, Emerson. I couldn't focus, because I thought my response to how he speaks is, it sounds to me like you don't know what you want me to do. I know I'm very structured. I know I'm very structured, but I could feel my frustration, I suppose, or my uncertainty rising the first couple of times I watched it, and my discomfort. I thought, this is
for you.
Yoga,
what was that? Was it too much option? What do you think was the frustrating part for you?
Well, it's just, you could do this if you wanted to, or you could do that, and it's like, I don't want to be making. This is about me. I don't want to be making those decisions. I mean, I'm happy. I like having parameters within which to work, but it seemed to me what I experienced was I could do anything I wanted.
Yes, it was too open for you.
It wasn't comfortable for me. Okay. So that was really interesting. But when I listened to it today, I got more in touch with what Nell was referring to. I think I got rid of the flap, and I could, and it's probably because I haven't been busy, So I had the time, but. Yeah, I looked at 17.31 minutes. Oh, God, I don't think I can do this.
Well, it's really lovely, Valerie, because what I've discovered, he's very polarizing. Some people really love him. Mm-hmm. Some people find him very irritating. There doesn't ever seem to be anyone that's, whatever, Yeah. And he's also a really lovely guy, but he's very, very different to Bessel, because I don't know, do you know the story about how they all met and got together? And
no.
So very quickly, what happened was Bessel was the head of the Justice Resource Institute in Boston, which was an organization he established and built. Bessel had married an Australian yoga teacher, and she was on him all the time to say, look, you really should be looking at yoga for trauma and blah, blah, blah. At that very moment, while she was in his shell pink, in the other door walks David saying, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm interested in working with trauma. And I'd like to be able to work together. So they formed a collaboration. And so there was Dave Emerson, Elizabeth Hopper, and Jen Turner. Dave's actually his background, he's got a master's in arts. He didn't really have a mental health background. So he's a yoga teacher. But Jen and Elizabeth, I think, were both psychologists and yoga teachers. So together over a couple of years, they explored how best to use yoga to help people who were dealing with trauma. And they've drawn from a lot of other somatic material and put language around it. So the principles that we're doing is sort of one of the key contributions they made to our understanding of what are some of the ways in which yoga could be shaped to make it more trauma informed. And when Annabelle and I went across to the States to do the training, Dave and Bessel did the training together, and they're two very different. Bessel's very easygoing, you know, fluid, open, and Dave is quite sort of structured and a little compartmentalized and, you know, a little bit like, this is how we're going to do it sort of thing. And anyhow, so then a couple of years ago, or last year, I can't remember, Bessel left JRI. He was asked to leave. There's a whole story there about potentially, you know, bullying. He was being a bully in the workplace and all this sort of stuff. But there feels like there's also been some politics there. So now Bessel has set up his own trauma organization again around the corner from JRI. Dave is still with JRI. And there's a little bit of, you know, friendly sort of argy that goes on between them now.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's an interesting sort of background. And Dave's unit now is called the Center for Embodiment, I think. And they're expanding, so they're doing trauma sensitive weightlifting and all sorts of weird and wonderful things out of that unit now. Bessel continues to endorse yoga, but he's also done a lot of exploration into psychodrama, neurofeedback, EMDR, a whole range of other things that he also recommends for trauma. So he's still on the hunt. He's actually, I'm pretty sure he's actually looking at microdosing psychedelics at the moment for PTSD.
He talked a bit about that in that. In that thing, and he also talked a lot about EMDR.
Yes.
Narelle and Jenny, if you haven't taken time to look and listen to that, it really, honestly, is so worthwhile.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks, I think I might have, but I watched it now 5 weeks ago, so I can't remember. I watched it the week after we did.
When I sent it out. If you just Google Bessel van der Kolk YouTube, there'll be stacks that come up. He's a bit of a, you know, he does lots of things. So you'll see lots of different videos. He's got a bit of a thick Dutch accent, so sometimes it can be a little hard to hear him. And he's always out in Australia. He comes out, well, until COVID, he was out 2 or 3 times a year. So if you're interested, the Byron Clinic, the guy there hosts Bessel. So if you want to get on the mail list for when Bessel comes out, just Google Byron Clinic and get on their mail list. And I don't imagine Bessel will be out this year. He was planning to come out this year, but he will definitely most probably be out again next year. And he normally does 2 or 3 day workshops in all the capital cities. He's quite expensive.
Really?
Yeah, he's quite expensive. You'd most probably about $1,200 to see him. So he's certainly got his prosperity consciousness going. But you know, if you're in this area, if you're enjoying this work, then you know, he's worthwhile going to see. Yeah. And it's great, Valerie.
Van der Kolk, isn't it?
Van der Kolk. K-O-L-K. Very unfortunate name. K-O-L-K.
Yeah, it is a little, isn't it?
Here you go.
Yes, the body keeps the score.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So, fantastic.
Shirley, could I just please mention, I'll have to duck off at 8:15 a little bit early.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. No problems. Let's move into the session, huh? And let's talk a little bit about sensing muscle dynamics, and we're also going to explore this method that I'd like to share, Hannah method that I'd like to share with you. So when I sent you out the reading, particularly in reference to that table, I was wanting to sort of widen your awareness, particularly as yoga teachers. You know, we're scanning students a lot. We're looking at how they're holding their bodies and how they're being in their bodies. And so I felt that table gave you some nice language, descriptive language, to actually be able to get a sense of where is this person in their nervous system, either from safety all the way through to collapse. And of course, like as we've talked about before, you know, working with the window of tolerance, we want to try and get people into that sort of safe, optimal zone. Hopefully by the time they leave, they may not arrive in that. And so the practices and things we might choose will be dependent on how their nervous system arrives into session, whether it's one-on-one or in group. Now, with that, particularly in those states, it talks about freeze, alert, and flight or fight response. What we'll see is like sort of increased agitation in the system. When we get to freeze, fright, there's an immobilization. It's almost like we call that the classic dissociation. But interestingly, what happens in that, there is a muscular guarding that happens, even though the person's not actually moving. There's an intensity in the muscles because the muscles are trying to liberate movement, but they're actually frozen in the spot. So it's almost like burning rubber, you know? So the word collapse sometimes is a bit misleading because sometimes in that space, there's quite a rigidity in the body. There's nowhere for the adrenaline to go. And so we get an intensity in the body. Now, this intensity becomes really familiar for the client. After a while, it becomes their normal. That makes sense. And so when we're working with trauma survivors physically, as they start to the body starts to soften and they start to realize they actually have some control over their felt sense, it can get a little scary because in some respects that sort of body armoring and the rigidity almost feels like I'm ready for whatever, you know, it feels safe, it feels familiar. As the person actually starts to move more towards safety longer term, like more consistently, and the body softens, sometimes there's an anxiety that they feel a little exposed or a little unprotected because there's an association with the body rigidity and safety. There isn't an association of body comfort and safety. If anything, body comfort may have led to not being safe, you know, when they were relaxed and not on guard. Does that make sense? So when we think of someone coming to a yoga class, particularly if it's their first time, naturally their nervous system's going to be a little bit upregulated. And we'll most probably, depending on where they are in their recovery, we might see them in a fairly gross way in that they're quite rigid and tight. And it hasn't occurred to them that they actually have control over the intensity. There's like a removal of awareness that this is just how I am, you know, I'm just tight. And in somatic work, we talk about different body types. And one of the classic body types is what we call masochistic, a masochistic body type, solid, big, rigid, tight jaw, little movement, little flexibility. There's all these different body types. And that's very much like what we see. There's like an intensity in the body and it's become a survival instinct. So the concept of sensing muscle dynamics provides a couple of things. One, it's a very direct connection with the body for someone who doesn't have the body. To feel a muscle, remember sensing muscle dynamics is about feeling a muscle in your body moving. And particularly, so like when Nell was talking about the core exercise, even adding your hands to that area of your body as you activate the core, you know, really accelerates the awareness of, wow, you know, I've got some sort of strength here. And we could explore that now just sitting as you are, if you like. You might, if you've got a bit of room to sit back with, to place your hands where your core is, and then just allow yourself to come back until you feel the core engage. I've got the heater behind me, so I can't go back much further. It feels quite nice on my kidneys. But I can feel my core. And notice if your breath shortens. Because there's one thing about holding the muscle, but if the breath shortens, that's not useful for someone in trauma. So can we bring breath even to that? Now you might start to notice a bit of trembling happening or a bit of twitching or like the muscle. So then what could you now do to come back to a space where that trembling or twitching stops? And you feel, just notice that. Notice that you've got the intensity. You might even feel a bit of a residual if your back was taking that and not the core. Yeah. And if you weren't certain, you could go back again and feel it, allowing the breath. So there's a sense we can feel our strength, but with breath. Strength with breath is much more in safety than strength and no breath, because strength and no breath is panic.
Mm.
Mm.
And then we could come back again. Yeah. So did you notice that as we were playing with that? The intensity, you've got some control over the intensity. Now this is a bit of like a epiphany for survivors of trauma, that actually, you mean I could actually, if I'm feeling, you know, some tightness or whatever in my body, I could actually move or adjust or change, you know? And that's part of the principles of this work, is once we've started to give the person their body back through interoception and choice and action, that also sometimes, particularly if pain is a big part of their profile, that they may actually be able to have some input into how they experience their pain. It doesn't mean the pain goes away, but could they find a different experience of the pain? And I'll often language it as different, not better or worse, but just different. Just notice what's shifted there. We're not, and I'll often say, we're not going for necessarily better, but just notice and find the position. So like if we played with that core exercise, and of course you could add intensity by lifting the legs, the feet off the ground as well, if you're sitting, to, you know, help the client understand that they can play with that and it's okay. Yeah. So it's very much directed through the body, not through me telling them, okay, now hold that and stay there. It's for them to find that. That's the first thing to think about. So when we're working with that, particularly if the hands are on, so for example, you know, the classic one where you place your hand on the bicep and curl the bicep up. So we could just try that. And you could even make a little fist, and you feel how the bicep tightens when you make a fist, and then just let the fist relax and notice what happens to the bicep under your hand. Do you notice how it softens? You may or may not feel that. Like a bit subtle. Almost pulls away from my hand a bit. When I make the fist, the bicep comes up to meet my hand. When I soften the fist, I feel the bicep just move away from my hand and almost lengthen and soften a little bit. And I could actually make that even more by taking of less flexion. Notice that, and then, so play with that and notice you actually have control over the intensity of this muscle.
Really simple, but really effective.
Yes, but it's a little bit like, I think what you were saying, Jen, sometimes we've got to slow the work down. No, Narelle was saying, we've got to slow the work down. We have to slow it. We can't sort of, I was invited to do a trauma sensitive class a few weeks ago on a closed yoga group. And I think I've posted it up on the trauma sensitive Facebook page. And I did preface it by saying, now this is trauma sensitive yoga. It's going to be very different to the type of yoga. This was a yin sort of yoga group. So they're used to holding and, you know, being in the practices for a long time and really working with intensity, but not so much relief of intensity. There's a sense of pushing through intensity, whereas this model is pulling away from intensity, because trauma survivors know intensity very well. And anyhow, one of the women privately messaged me later, and it was a seated class, so it was quite slow. She said, I've never actually realized what happens to my back when I do twists, because normally I'm doing them so fast. I didn't actually realize, she said, and I could actually, and anyway, so she described this whole process. And she said, I didn't realize how useful it is to just slow down in the practice and be with my body. Yeah, because yoga can be a great rationalization to not be in your body. I'm going to go to yoga. I'm going to go to a really strong class, and I can actually not be in my body for 2 hours, but I'm going to get rewarded because there is a, wow, you did 2 hours of yoga. You know, and what I'll often say to clients is to be in your body for 2 hours is really challenging work. And you most probably won't be. Notice when you leave, notice when you come back. Yeah. Notice if the practice becomes too intense, if you're doing a sequence, or you might do a salute to the sun or whatever. Notice, when you keep pushing through, notice when you can choose to rest. So they're all examples of working with intensity. But in Dave and Bessel's work, this muscle dynamics is very much working this muscle in this way. So wherever the client can put their hand on a muscle, sometimes I'll use jaw. Jaw is also good. And the great thing with jaw is, if you remember Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, which is about, the vagus nerve, which is one of the main nerves in the body, it has a number of different divisions. So the ventral vagal is that part of the vagus nerves that feeds up into the face and also into the heart. And that's what they call the social engagement system. So if you're trying to get people more into that safe, optimal zone, socially engaged system, just moving the jaw, yawning, laughing, doing whatever you want to do, closing eyes, opening eyes, anything to do will actually move them more into social engagement. Yeah. So, and that's where we want them to be. Particularly, when you get people who've got very flat affect or depression, and they come in and you can't get it, you wouldn't get a smile out of them. So just, let's all just do that. Really great for ventral vagal. So now with the jaw, it's a bit like finding the jaw and gritting the jaw and squeezing the teeth together. I feel like it's all working. Really hold it. That's it. And when you notice it becomes too much, then soften and let the jaw do what it wants to do. You've got control over the intensity of your jaw. And most people in trauma, I shouldn't say most, I haven't seen any research, but in my experience, a lot of them have got TMJ and tooth grinding problems. Yeah. So that's a very accessible muscle for people to actually access. Yeah. So that muscle, the arm, remember the thigh muscle, particularly if we're doing warrior or triangle movement. So remember, the muscle needs to be moving. It's very hard to feel a passive muscle. So, okay, whilst I'm holding my arm out and the muscle technically isn't passive, it's hard to distinguish muscle from anything else. As soon as I move that arm, there's something moving under my hand now. That's a muscle. So it's easier then to feel that. So particularly if you've got people that aren't very into their bodies, just to say, okay, notice that muscle. That's not sensing muscle dynamics, because it's too hard. We say, if you move the arm, now feel that muscle moving under your arm. You could make a little fist, feel how the muscle responds. It gets intense. You could hold it for as long as you want, and then notice how it feels to lessen the intensity. Yeah. And then after a few experiences of that over a number of classes, I might then use the linking sort of statement to say, I'm wondering, as we play with this, how many times in life do you just sit with intensity when you could just unfold like we're doing now and relax, and you can do this here, and so we start to make the link. Sorry, Valerie.
I was just going to say, for most of us, I just noticed, it's just because I noticed I had my shoulders up near my ears.
Yeah.
I can let them go down. And I mean, I know it's different, but
that's another example. You could have put your hand on your shoulder and lift it up and feel the muscle, the shoulder in intensity, the trap muscle. Yeah. And then you could just slowly soften that and notice how that feels. Notice, does it feel less intense? We're going to a place of less intensity, greater intensity. Explore what that is for you. Everyone's movement's going to be a little different. But notice what that is for you. So do you notice in that, Valerie, too, I'm giving you choice, but I'm also giving you parameters.
Yes.
So I'm not just saying to you, I'll explore the shoulder and allow it to move however you want it to move. That feels a bit too open. But if we give it a little tighter parameter, then there's less sort of, you know, well, tell me what to do here. Like, don't just say to me, move my shoulder, because I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we got a sense of that with sensing muscle dynamics. And so next session, we're going to look at spatial orientation. And as we presented in the training, they go together really nicely. But what I wanted to add to that, are there any questions on that little stuff that we've done? It's mostly a review, really, from what we did in the main training. All makes sense?
Yeah.
So I'd like to move on to the Hannah technique, because I know Nell's got to leave at 8:15 too. So this is a really great technique. Comes from an American guy called Thomas Hannah, who was a chiropractor and a kinesiologist. And he talks about this concept of somatic amnesia, which is if we don't use a muscle in its full extent of stretch, that the brain becomes almost set to where we tend to use the muscle. So the brain gets an amnesia that, for example, I could stretch my arm up here, and that might be generally how far I stretch my arm. So my brain says, okay, that's fine, but I might actually be able to stretch even more. But I'm not actually using that extra sort of foot I just got every day, because this is sort of what I do. You know, that's my set point. So Thomas Hannah suggests, and this is particularly useful for people with chronic pain or really these tight bound stressed bodies, to actually wire those somatosensory motor pathways to actually know, oh, I've actually got a lot more openness in my body than I actually use. And so he developed a technique called pandiculation. Great word. And when I send you the recording for this, I'll send you some links to his work, but also a great little book. Don't know if I've got it here, which takes you through a whole, what the techniques are, but a whole range of movement practices, which sits right on yoga. So a lot of the practices are really yoga practices. So we're going to explore what pandiculation is, and then we'll feel it first, and then I'll break it down for you. So I'm just wondering if wait for Valerie to come back.
Excuse me, Shirley, I'm just writing this down. Is it P-A-N-D-I-C-U-L-A? Pandicular?
No, P-A-N-D-I-C-U-L-A-T-I-O-N, pandiculation.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Pandiculation. Yep. So what we do is we use a pandiculating stretch. So to explore what that is, just wait for,
Yep.
there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to invite you to do, just as you're sitting, is, and he drew this sort of like from the movement that happens when we wake up first thing in the morning. So let's imagine you've gone to bed, you've woken up, and you're going to have a stretch. So I'm going to invite you to do that however you want. So just stretching up, stretching through your arms, just have a nice sort of morning stretch. You still all there, or have I frozen?
You've frozen.
You all seem to have frozen. Okay, hopefully I'll come back in a sec. Because you're all frozen on my screen.
We're moving on my screen.
Okay,
Yep,
so am I moving now? No.
You're frozen.
Yes.
Okay,
You
let
need
me
to
just,
have a pandiculation, Shirley. You're frozen.
you know what it is? I need to get rid of the technology. Let me get off the mobile here, because I'm maybe taking up some bandwidth. Okay, all back again. There we go. Sorry, guys.
Right.
Jenny's back. Jenny, you back?
I'm back.
Okay. You're all still looking a bit frozen. Am I
So
still
you.
frozen? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of this and then come back in again.
Okay.
I just don't want to end the whole meeting. So I'm just trying to make sure I only remove myself. So I'm just going to leave and then I'll come back.
Bye.
Bye.
I bought the Thomas Hannah book the other day.
Valerie, good on you. You're all over it.
I put it away safely, of course. I can't put my hands on it simply, but that's all right.
Had you heard about him, and is that why you bought the book?
Yes.
Okay.
I used to be a body worker, and so I know about some, you know, those sort of things are really interesting for me. So I
Okay.
don't know.
So am I?
Sorry,
that's okay. I can hear you. You're still frozen. So that. Oh no, Valerie's moving now. So can you? Am I moving? Am I moving now?
No. Yeah.
Oh,
No.
yes.
Yeah.
Momentarily.
Okay. Well, like what we'll do is, how about, don't worry about that. You can't see me moving. You can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're still recording. Let's explore this pandiculation. So we're going to just stretch. So just imagine you're stretching. And I'm imagining you're doing that now because you're all frozen on my screen. Hopefully you'll unfreeze in a sec. So imagine that we're stretching, and then feel what that stretch feels like, and then just relax the stretch and just take a moment to notice.
Oops. Oh, poor Shirley. Oh.
Shirley, you've come.
I think I'm in the, yeah, I think I'm in the vortex of this Mercury retrograde.
Shirley, if you turn your camera off, we could possibly still hear you, and that will challenge us to be learning by listening to you.
Okay.
And it might be a little better.
Let's try that.
Good idea.
Because I can't see any of you now.
Oh, you can't see us. Oh.
No. So if you can turn your cameras back on. We've
got ours on, Shirley.
Let me just pause, because I've come back in on my phone.
Okay.
Let me turn the camera off.
We can hear you well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So so I'm back on. I've turned my camera off so you can all hear me. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Got the recording going again. Let's see how we go. So I'll come back on my mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so all right. So we just,
she's gone again. No.
Must have something to do with Shirley's internet.
there's something happening with the internet. If you could just give me a minute, I've just got to go and check the internet. Just one moment, guys.
Sure.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
I can't think of anything very exciting to tell you right now.
Your book sounds great, Narelle. It made me think of a book that I'd been told was really great read about creative writing as a part of processing experience and making change in your life. It wasn't specifically for trauma at the time, but yeah, it just made me think about what a great thing it is to do. It's a very creative way of
it's been really helpful.
Good on you. Yeah,
just to be able to clearly explain, even from that perspective of a meditation teacher as well as someone who's experiencing things. You know, you can almost witness yourself, can't you? You can say, oh, that's my nervous system. Now my mind's getting engaged in.
Yeah, you can just watch that. But let's see, because at the moment it seems like I'm stable and I'm on. And Valerie, you can hear me? Narelle?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. And Narelle, can you? Okay, all right. So let's see if we can get through this. Sorry, guys. So we just did a normal stretch. Now I want to do a pandiculated stretch. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, once again, take a breath in and stretch the arms above your head. But as you do that, see if you can stretch past the stretch. So actually really stretch as far as you can. Stretch, 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 stretch. And then on the exhale, slowly relax the arms. So don't just automatically bring the arms back down. On the exhale, slowly lower the arms back down until they come back to rest into your lap. And just take a moment for a couple of normal breaths. And then let's do that again. So on an inhale, stretching tall, stretching stretch past the stretch now. See if you can get a little bit more stretch. You may not stretch quite as much as you did the first time. And then on your exhale, slowly relax the stretch. Let the muscle come slowly back into resting until it comes back to rest in your lap. And once again, just pause. Notice for a couple of breaths. And you might even notice that your breath shifts a little in this type of stretch. And we'll do one more stretch. So in your own time, as you breathe in, stretching, arms above the head, and then see if you can stretch even more. Extend the stretch. Stretch past the stretch. Exhaling, slowly relaxing the stretch. Until once again, arms and hands resting comfortably. Pause. And just let the breath flow. That's it. And just take a moment to notice what you might be noticing in the shoulders, in the chest, in the arms. Anything else that you might be noticing after doing 3 of those pandiculated stretches. And I'll talk about what we did in a moment. But it would be nice to sort of hear what you noticed in doing that pandiculated stretch. It may have felt a little different to the first stretch we did, or may have felt the same. So does anyone have any comments on what they noticed?
It's a not unfamiliar one for me, Shirley, as part of EBR1, to do that stretch and then ask people to stretch even further. So there wasn't any newness about it for me, at least doing it that way. Yeah, I'm aware of my laps.
Okay. Yeah, okay. There is a difference in what we did than EBR1, but let's I'll talk about that in a sec, but just be nice to hear people's thoughts on what they might have noticed. Nell or Jenny?
Well, I noticed the third time, the stretch came right from my hips, and there was an openness at the base, which was really nice because that core one we were doing, I didn't like the iliopsoas sort of tightness. So that made me just interested in, like, wow, could I release the iliopsoas through a deep
Yes. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. Nell, because I know we're coming up to time for you.
That was me. That was Nell.
Oh, that was Nell. Sorry, I thought that was Jenny. Okay, sorry.
No. For me, Shelley, after the third time, I felt, because I was doing it with my eyes closed so I could get more sense, I felt a lot more space and a release right through my chest and shoulders to my neck, and my body felt straighter, my torso.
Okay, great. So yes, so with this pandiculated stretch, the formula is, I've just got a message from IINet that they're having problems. That explains why we're having problems. Okay. Anyhow, this pandiculated stretch, the first part of it is you stretch past the stretch, on an in-breath. The second part of it is when you come out of that stretch, to slowly come out of the stretch on the exhale. So allow the muscle to come back to resting slowly. And then...
Oh, dang. I can't hear you.
Very annoying. I just dropped out again, but I'm back. And the most important part of that is to pause and rest with the breath after that exhale. So you actually let the body take a moment to calibrate what actually just happened. So to summarize again, you stretch past the stretch on the in-breath. You slowly come back to resting on the out-breath and pause before you do another move for 1 or 2 breaths. And then you'll, and then each time you do it, sometimes what you find is you don't stretch quite as much, or the stretch becomes deeper. because the muscle fibers are softening and lengthening, and the brain's going, oh, actually, I've got a lot more stretch than I'm actually using. So when we work in this pandiculated way, what we're doing is really working on that somatic amnesia, which is a really valuable tool, particularly for those cramped up, tight bodies. Yeah. So as you were saying, Nell, you could add that to any yoga practice you were doing to, and in the book that I'm going to send you the link to, they have some wonderful stretches like making your body an X shape on the floor and lengthening through the arms and through the legs at the same time, which is a beautiful stretch for the spine and very hip opening and opening up shoulder girdle at the same time. So where people have got this sort of chronic muscle guarding, holding, this pandiculated stretching or Hana is a great way to really kickstart the body into softening and lengthening. And so once again, it fits really nicely alongside this theme of muscle intensity, that I can also have some more control over the softening and the lengthening of my muscles as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like it.
Yes.
So do I.
So you could play with this in your own practice. I will send you, when I send out the recording, some suggested exercises that come out of the Hana book that you could play with in your own personal practice to get a sense of how you could work with this. And then you might decide, I quite like that, and that could be a useful book. It's not an expensive book. I think it's $10 or $15. It's not a big investment, but might be something you might like to add to your yoga program. So obviously that works beautifully in a general class, but even more importantly in a trauma class where people are so chronically bound up and tight that they can actually start to feel their body in space, which takes us to spatial orientation next time. And as you say, Jen, people are left with a bit more spaciousness in the body, and often the breath deepens and lengthens as well as the muscles start to soften and relax. Makes sense? Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, for me, I do an exercise sometimes, and I vary from week to week, season to season, what I'm teaching usually. Just modify it a bit. But one of them I call it the puppet. So we stretch,
Yes.
and then I describe it as letting the strings go, and we fold forward and roll up. And I'm doing this without realizing what I'm doing, really. I mean,
well, the rolling up isn't relaxing the muscle. It's actually taking the muscle in a different movement. So if we're working purely with this pandiculation, there's a lengthening, softening, rest.
Yeah, and I'm not incorporating the rest in what I do.
No, and so, but in Hannah's work, he talks about ragdoll, which is similar to what you're talking about with puppet, with a couple of modifications. So I'll send that so you can have a look at it.
Great.
But it's a very, very useful technique, and I've been incorporating it in my teaching now for years. And the feedback I consistently get from students is that they just feel longer, more open. You know, for pain clients, it does shift their experience of pain. Because obviously, if you've got a lot of pain and tightening around the joints, we have to remind the muscles they could actually lengthen, and that then relieves a lot of the pain around the joints as well.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, because of the internet problems tonight, and I do apologize, as I say, I'm just seeming to be plagued with this Mercury retrograde at the moment. We might finish the session here, and rather than continue to sort of work in this way, if that's okay for everybody. And what I'll do is I'll send out this recording. I'll have a listen to it. If it's not really clear, I'll do an additional little video to talk to you about this as well. And I might also post up with this recording a great little video on the Hana technique with some of the movements so you can actually see it as well. Does that feel okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Really appreciate it, Shelley. Thanks for your effort. No,
that's okay. I'm sorry that we've been bothered with this tonight. It's that full moon. It's shining right into my window now as I speak. But we're going to meet again in August. That was the new date that we put in place. So that is, I'm just going to confirm that while we've got everybody. August the 3rd at 7 p.m. And we're looking at spatial orientation, and I'll send that material out tomorrow alongside the recording for tonight as well.
Thank you.
For those, it's a pleasure. And for those of you that are watching the recording, sorry it's so choppy tonight. But we're yoga teachers, we're flexible, we can deal.
We can flow.
Exactly, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you. Have a great month.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Take care. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Valerie.
Bye.
Bye now.